Hello ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to make some short and more digestible content. This is going to be Sunday, my break day is when I'm recording it. I slept a little bit extra, and that's why I look a little bit tired and my hair is all wild. Well, that's alright, I think I deserve it. I've been very busy the last days, but I wanted to leave you guys with a short little video. I wanted to speak about the EU teams, summarizing them and setting expectations for all of these teams. I want to start off with Mad Lions. Mad Lions, the reason everyone's not so hot on them is their last weeks of play looked quite unimpressive. I think the one that stands out the most is their best of 5 against Rogue, which I recommend that you check out if you want some deeper information, where Rogue made some great adaptations after their loss against Fnatic, picked up a lot of the champions they played, and Mad Lions just couldn't play ball. A lot of people have a very clear memory of Finn's performance against G2. Imagine Finn doing, bad things to Orome, so to speak. Orome was getting handled pretty well by Finn, and this is in contrast with Finn's performance against the likes of a Wunder. So Mad Lions, the reason everyone's not so hot on them coming into the World Championships because of these things. But if you're Mad Lions fans, the things you need to look out for is the cooperation between Shadow and Kaiser. This is what made them so strong always. They could always pressure into mid and allow Humanoid to play in a very crazy manner. A lot of mid laners are frustrated playing against Humanoid because it seems almost as if he breaks the laws of what should be possible. He plays very aggressive, even though it's been kind of honed down and kind of handled in a way. And I think in general, Mad Lions' approach to the game allows for a very high ceiling because they play with a lot of variance. Sometimes they have games where they look god-awful. Sometimes they have games where they beat a G2 or a Fnatic on a good day. And I think it's important to highlight coming into the tournament that, this is the type of team that in, play-ins could potentially drop a game or two against some of the weaker teams, but they have the benefit of having Peter Dunn on their team. And for the people that don't know Peter Dunn is a guy who, researches all the wildcard regions to a very careful extent, and probably has the most knowledge out of anyone when it comes to wildcard regions. So this is a massive strength to have coming into the play-ins, and Mad Lions being able to potentially skip best of 5s by getting the first seed in their group could be a very big deal. I think a big reason why they've been slumping is Shadow's success was never through pathing. He lost a lot of games due to pathing errors in the past, especially against the likes of, for example, Xerxes or Eankos, where he just got completely outpathed and then eventually just fell behind. He is playing a lot on his feeling, and right now, in the current state of things, the discussion is always with Lilia, with Nidalee, with Graves. What is the pathing that you're taking? Is it the most efficient? How are you, getting the most out of your champion? So those choices begin to add up and matter so much more in the current jungle meta than the previous one, where Shadow was enjoying playing Lee Sin and an Olaf, where everything is pretty cookie cutter and you can boil it down to mechanics and also, your synergy with your support or your mid laner, and also on top of that, the work ethic, not the work ethic, but the overall mechanical prowess of yourself. That's what you can rely on. And this is what Shadow does well, right? Shadow's very good mechanically, and this is his biggest strength. But all in all, coming into the tournament, the meta is very different. It is not ideal for him. Another thing to note when it comes to Mad Lions, this is a team with 4 rookies. Humanoid has been around the block. He was at the World Championship last year, so he has some good experience under his belt. This is a team that definitely has room to improve, but the things to pay attention to is, can Shadow adapt to the current jungle meta? Can Orome level up his play? Can Humanoid also have enough patience to wait for Shadow and Kaiser to figure stuff out? When it comes to the biggest strength of the team, I think Kazi and Kaiser have been, the shining light of the team for a very long period. I think they are very strong bot lane. They're willing to play any type of champions. They are not held back in any setting or any meta. I think they are very wild and explosive. I think Mad Lions is definitely one of those teams that can cause a lot of upsets. I imagine them coming through play-ins, and if things pan out as we'd imagine, because there's four groups, four groups and also four European teams, they would land in the same group as DRX and Top Esports and FlyQuest. Can they upset that group? I doubt it, but luckily we have a lot of playing games to see before we need to potentially lock in our pick'ems. So that is definitely, something that is going to make it easier. So that's a little short summary on Mad Lions. A lot of variance, a lot of craziness. Could drop games against weak teams, could beat good teams on a good day too. With the nature of best of ones, anything can happen. I imagine that they're going to get through play-in. Let's pay attention to how much they improve. The next team in line is Rogue. So if anyone watched my top lists, I rated Rogue very, very highly. Why? Simply because of their performance into G2. They showed me something where, as a team, the most of their wins that they got through were very cookie cutter. They were playing around the same compositions. They were sticking to the same basics, and that's a good thing if you want to rack up wins on the board. I think in terms of precision, you guys have heard these two topics that I've always raised when it comes to evaluating teams: precision and activity. And Rogue did something against G2 where they definitely tried to raise their level of activity. They began to fight very heavily around 2v2 mid. They were setting up dives, and that's something that is very positive to see, because you realize then as a viewer and as a coach that Rogue is taking the necessary steps to raise and elevate themselves to the next level. I still think in a world where Rogue had a better performing top laner than Finn at the time, they would have beaten G2. That was the margin of error that happened. Caps was doing a lot of the heavy lifting against Fnatic and some of the other series that they played, but against Larssen was indeed keeping him on his toes. There were games in that best of 5 that Larssen definitely performed better. Another key thing about, Rogue and why I'm hyping them up so much is I think the core members outside of their top lane have been performing super, super well. Inspired has adapted well to the current jungle meta, has good work, good synergy together with Larssen, and works together with the bot lane well too. Hansama and Vander play many different champions, and it feels like they've broken out of their shell finally. They were always very, very strong in scrims, but they couldn't really perform against G2 or Fnatic or in these big games where it was necessary for them to really, really step it up. Let me just take a sip of water. Now Hansama and Vander have definitely stepped up. So I'm very excited about Larssen, Hansama, Vander. They've increased the level of activity. They're more active in the early game. They're more active in the mid game. And they've kept that level of precision. Because when we talk about precision, if we compare it to the other 3 teams that are coming into the World Championship, Fnatic and G2 and also Mad Lions make a lot of sloppy mistakes. Barring that their level of activity is a little bit higher, there's a lot of mistakes that definitely can't be there coming into Worlds that we're hoping that these teams are going to fix during the bootcamp coming into the World Championship. And then it comes down to Finn, of course. Finn, he was the most successful on champions like Kled. I remember his Kiana. That was something that is easy to remember because his Kiana was very, very good. He had some good Aatrox performances and is currently struggling. We saw a lot of games where he was straight up running it down with Gangplank. He was finding the most success on Ornn, but I don't know if that was a Finn thing. I felt like that was more of a Ornn thing. Finn has a lot of, work to be done, but the beauty of this for Rogue is if Finn increases his level, all of a sudden Rogue looks more and more dangerous. If Finn becomes less of a liability, Rogue becomes more and more dangerous. And I think having such a glaring weakness coming into the World Championship, I think it's something that definitely a team can put effort into. I think also in a lot of cases you can mask it because the current meta allows you to pick the likes of a Shen or the likes of a Ornn and completely mask the fact that your top laner is a weak laner. But we will have to, see how a Rogue is going to approach this. This is Finn's first rodeo at the World Championship, maybe potentially even first bootcamp coming into Worlds. So we don't know what can come out of that, but that's the things that you want to pay attention to. the superstars of the team for sure, Larson and Inspired. They did a lot of work against G2, and I honestly felt like they deserved to win that best of 5. So Finn, let's hope Ornn is not banned. Let's put him on some Ornn duty, and we're going to be alright. But I'm worried in the group that they are in that the top laners are just going to straight up devour Finn, because he is playing against two of the top laners that are probably the best at destroying top laners below their pedigree. He's playing against Zoom and Nuguri. So I'm not thinking that Rogue is going to get it out of this group. They might take a win. Maybe they'll play spoiler in the JDG Damwon saga. But getting out of this group is going to be super, super tough. But I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that the other teams cannot carefully prepare for the likes of Rogue. They need to really, really, cater to this idea of destroying Finn and neutralizing the very powerful mid 2v2. But that's the thing, the mid laners and the junglers in these groups, they don't mess around. So it's just luck of the draw. Yeah. Nevertheless, we jump into the next team, Fnatic. Fnatic is a very interesting pickle because individually I think they are very, very strong. I think Whip was underrated as a player. I think when it comes to Western top laners, I would put him second coming into this tournament, and then maybe Broken Blade third. Whippo second, because honestly, with the way Fnatic plays, their laners are almost required to survive on their own. It's very rare that Whippo gains any type of jungle attention. He manages his wave on his own, and he tanks a lot of pressure. He plays the current meta super well. He itemizes super, super well. His Gangplank, his Ornn, anything that, Shen, anything that is revolving around the current meta, Whippo does super, super well. The sad part is that people are always comparing Whippo to Wunder, and Wunder, I think, is in a class of his own and is definitely in the conversation of being top 3. But Whippo is very, very good, honestly, very, very good. I think even there were matches against Wunder where he was doing super well in lane and forcing a Graves to come up top level 3 and really, really, make the difference. I think Whippo is very, very underrated. I think his situation, a Fnatic situation, is always tricky to evaluate because from outside it doesn't seem like they're playing as a team. A lot of the times they're taking fights when they are, doing something different on the map. They seem scattered. The synergy between the jungle and the laners isn't really there. And that's what makes everyone so strangely individually impressive. Because usually you have junglers, this team is not working together. The jungler can't really perform. Still, Selfmade has found a way to, be very, very effective. They managed to get second place in the region. They managed to beat G2 in a best of 5 through the sheer force of individual prowess. I think if any activity happens around, the lanes, usually it's around bottom side. I think the look the Fnatic has coming into the World Championship is very similar to last year. And I think it all comes down to, for Fnatic, if they can figure out a way to play, figure out a way to draft that has a lot of depth to it. Because when we had the finals, the second finals between G2 and Fnatic, it was a very sloppy one, and I understand that Fnatic could have won some of those games, but I think when Evelyn was out of the picture with the Lucian ban, and when Hecarim, wasn't too involved, and there was some drafts that were built around Hecarim, all of a sudden it didn't look like the fiery Fnatic that beat G2 in the first place. It was just a competition of who could throw the most. So I think coming into the bootcamp, you have some very experienced players here that have been around the block. Whippo, Reckless, Nemesis, Selfmade now coming into his first World Championship. Hylissang is also very experienced. These are players that definitely can, set themselves up for success outside of, the relationship with the team. And I think with the bootcamp, it can do very, very well for Fnatic, but there's also a world where, of course, things implode and they can't figure out the way they want to play. But this is, the risk that as a viewer we'll have to just assess when the time comes. I put Fnatic to come out of groups. I think when it comes to LGD and TSM, I put Gen G first because I think they just have, if I compare pound for pound individual players between Genji and Fnatic, I just have to put the weight onto Genji. And if already you have a difference in players and you're not playing too much as a team, I just lean towards Genji naturally. But I believe Fnatic is going to win against LGD and TSM because TSM and LGD have very similar issues. They don't have any level of consistency. I feel like LGD is almost a better version of TSM. Live and die by their mid laner. Peanut has some good performances, some terrible performances, maybe from the thought that he needs to carry alone. I think Mark is also quite decent. I think in a world where LGD need to go through play-ins and they're going to reveal a lot of their cards, I think that's very beneficial for anyone in that group of death, because I think definitely LGD can be punished for it. And then there's TSM. I think Bjergsen is good, but that's a whole another video. I just feel like Fnatic is going to topple them, especially in a best of one environment. I think Fnatic, pound for pound, are just better than TSM. I think the North American finals and also the run that TSM did was impressive from a result point of view, but not so impressive from a play point of view. So I don't rate TSM that highly. Nevertheless, Fnatic, if they figure out a way to use bottom pressure, go into mid and cover up for their weaknesses, I think this team has some potential to maybe get to quarters, maybe get some wins in quarters too. But this is not a team that is going to win the World Championship. And the reason this is the case is the team is not working together. It doesn't have a 2v2 mid, it doesn't have a 3v3 mid, and that is a big weakness of any team that is going to want to, achieve those heights. Always the team that wins the World Championship is the one that has, the most precise and decisive 2v2 mid, 3v3 mid play. That's why the LPL teams are all looking at this. That's why G2 have been practicing this the whole year, whether it was with perks or with caps. And I think this is very important to highlight, because this has been a weakness for Fnatic for a very long time. I don't know if it's Nemesis, but it was the same thing with Broxah Nemesis. It was the same with Nemesis Selfmade. And in the end, this is all speculation because we don't know what's going on the inside of the team. I think Hylissang is also underrated as a player. I think he is world class. I think the average fan base often clings on to, oh, this is him dying. This is a piece of information that I can digest and understand. So this is the information that I'm going to cling on to, because he is dying in a position that seems awkward. So I'm going to just remember that piece of information. But all the greatness and the goodness of what Hylissang does is lost upon the average viewer. So I think often Hylissang is under undeserved scrutiny. It wasn't his best split, I think Hylissang always, in interviews, what he's spoken about is the trust his team has in him is very important for him to do his job. And we've seen situations where the trust is not there. And I feel like Hylissang and Bwipo, I feel like they're accurate measurements of what is going on on the inside of Fnatic. I think Hylissang, of course, I agree that sometimes he does completely crazy stuff, but that sometimes also squeezes wins. I think in situations where Hylissang recognizes that the game is in a losing position, he tries to flip it on its head. And to do that in a lot of cases requires craziness, literal craziness. I think Reckless and Hylissang is the best bot lane coming out of Europe coming into this tournament. I think this is definitely a bot lane that can hang around with some of the best that we have at the tournament. I wouldn't be able to say the same with the other bot lanes coming into this tournament. I would be slightly worried about the others, even though they are at decent level. But we are talking about the likes of Jackie Love, we're talking about the likes of Loken and Lumao, we're talking about the likes of Ruler, and of course, Life, Deft and Korea. These are bot lanes for the ages, half of them have won world championships. It's absolutely wild what the competition is at this one. And this leads us into the final team, G2. So G2 have, after the finals last year, they cemented and created this plan, this 1-year plan to make sure that they will peak coming into the finals. Last year at the finals, they were tired and exhausted, and understandably so. Fnatic put them to this test. There was 2 best-of-5s back-to-back that went to 5 games. Fnatic really wanted it, and G2 didn't want to let go of any titles. And then coming into the boot camp and constantly playing. They also had MSI. There was a very, very gruesome year. This time around, no MSI. They did the cap swap. Caps went AD carry in spring, and then they swapped back with caps in the mid lane for summer. And they've addressed some of the issues from last year. Last year, they didn't have that much of a functioning 2v2 mid lane, and that was their downfall against FPX. A lot of teams at the World Championship back in last year didn't have a 2v2 mid. Damwon didn't have a 2v2 mid. SKT surprisingly didn't have a 2v2 mid. They just didn't put a lot of attention to it, which was super, super surprising, at least when it came to the SKT point of view, because I thought that was their biggest strength coming into the tournament. But nevertheless, we continue. So now G2, 1-year plan. But this 1-year plan, it's kind of hard to foresee a situation where the bootcamp might not be in full effect. We have a quarantine and we have a very weird situation. This is a World Championship that is going to be stranger than any other World Championship. I've spoken about this at great length in my previous video. But with this in mind, I don't know how many of these issues that G2 wanted to fix in the bootcamp will be able to fix in the bootcamp, because I have full trust in G2 understanding their weaknesses and their problems, and I know that they try to win summer with the least amount of effort possible. I think when they are playing on the same patch, it's going to be very, very impactful, but looking at some of their issues, they are very, very imprecise. They die in lane in very, very awkward positions. I think the focus in terms of what needs to improve is, of course, the bot lane. We already mentioned the sheer force of competition that they're going to face at this tournament. Luckily, their group is quite easy, to be honest. I think Huan Feng and Sword Art is not a bot lane that you can let go of that easily, because I think if Suning is going to beat the likes of G2 in their group, because I imagine that G2 is going to get first in this group and it's going to be so important, then I think Suning is going to do it through their bot lane. Sword Art is very intelligent. Huan Feng is also super talented. Suning is a team that can definitely cause some upsets because they have very strong players with very, very high variance in almost all positions. I think Angel is a bit timid, but maybe he needs to be because he has SoFM and Bin on his team and a Sword Art that really, really likes to take charge. So I think it's not a clear-cut first place, but that first place is going to be super important, because if you get a second and all of a sudden you face a top esports or a JDG or a Damwon already in quarters, that might be the end of your tournament already. And I think G2 need time. G2 is a team that needs time. They're going to ramp up throughout the tournament, because remembering last year, in groups, they weren't that clean either. They beat C9 very convincingly, but they did some dumbass shit. And they dropped some games against Griffin, and they were very, very lucky with their draw at the end of the day. They drew Damwon, and I think matchup-wise they were good against Damwon at the time, because Damwon now is a very, very different team from what it was last year. It's a completely different team, so don't even make the comparison. It's just a completely black and white. And then they drew SKT, which also was a good matchup for them. And I think in a world where they drew, for example, an IG instead, or for example an FPX early, then G2's tournament run would have ended even earlier. I think there were 3 teams at that tournament that were better than them, and I think it was IG, FPX, and also Griffin. Griffin shot themselves in the foot, or stabbed themselves in their own foot with a sword. Everyone, if you know, you know. But nevertheless, G2 need time. Getting first place in that group is going to be super, super important. They need to, figure out a way to get the edge in the bot lane again. Everyone remembers the Kaiser Xayah meta, but it was also Perks doing incredible things on a Zoe. incredible things on a Syndra, incredible things on Varus as well. He did well on Varus. I know people are trying to forget that, but everyone's talking about how Perks was just successful in a specific meta, but I don't think it came down to the meta. A lot of the things that Perks did super well at that time was his wave management, his TP management, his wave management when it came to mid to late game to just be more efficient in farm, the way he kills jungle camps, how he uses his time. He was super effective and efficient as an AD carry. He had a champion pool that was bigger than everyone else's, and this was the biggest edge. I don't think it was a question of meta. Sure, like in the conversation of meta, I think the only problem he's running into now is the fact that AP bot lanes are not that powerful. But they weren't at the time where Perks shoved them in there anyway, so I believe Perks is someone that can define a meta. I would love to see some Carter's bot lane, I would love to see some Ziggs bot lane, but the problem is always what are the AD mid champions that we can see. There's Lucian, there's maybe a Tristana, there's maybe a Kiana, but overall, the other AD champions just AP champions, mid champions just tend to do a little bit better, and it doesn't, justify the sacrifice of putting something AP bottom side. So with that being said, I think G2 have a lot of work to do. I think they can grow within the tournament. I think the quarantine situation is going to be very, very strange, and it's not going to be, that beneficial to a lot of these teams. I would imagine that G2 is one of them, but I think through group stages, they're going to improve. If they reach quarters and they get a good draw, I think they can make a deep run in this tournament. If they get a very tough draw in quarters, maybe they don't have the time to solve some of these issues that they have. It is important to note that the World Championship is a very, very long tournament. Teams improve, teams get better, teams fix mistakes, and in general, just level up. And G2 is definitely one of them. If you look at the run last year, definitely that was the case. But then they plateaued because they reached exhaustion. And the whole plan of G2 is to make sure that that doesn't happen. So with the group with Suning, I think Suning is going to take second place. Machi is not that impressive. Team Liquid probably is going to be the team that is slotted in there fourth. Could be a different playing team, like the likes of Unicorns of Love, and that could maybe cause some damage, because it is much easier for G2 to play against a Team Liquid than against a team that has a lot of variance, like a Fengwu Buffalo, where they throw some crazy stuff at you, and all of a sudden, you are swinging in the darkness, and you are not in a place where you are, accustomed to. If they get Team Liquid and Machi, I think those are 3 W's for G2, because they play too standard to shock G2 in any shape or form. So I think in their group, their biggest rival is going to be Suning. Suning is going to be the second seed coming out of that group. That is a bit of a group of life, for sure. So with that being said, this was a small summary of all the European teams. For those that didn't, stick around during the entire time, I gave you some of my predictions coming into groups where these teams are going to land. All in all, I think if one team is going to make a deep run, it is if Rogue manages to get out of the group. I have a lot of faith in 4 of their players. If Finn can get his shit together, which I sincerely hope that he does, then Rogue could potentially make a deep run. But the first step is already the biggest challenge, a group with Daman and JDG. And if they manage to push out one of these teams, that would be historic. And honestly, this is the time for upsets. And I think if the stars align for Fnatic as well, and figure out how they want to play, and this bootcamp is the most nutritious thing ever, then, maybe they could do a deep run too, because they do in fact have great individual players. The only worry for me is Nemesis and his champion pool, and this is a conversation that I've had many times on stream, where people say the Nemesis is underrated, overrated, and in general the opinion varies. What worried me about Nemesis when it comes to his champion pool, I gotta see, he's playing Ilaoi. There's gonna be some people out there that are very, very passionate about Fnatic and are gonna be a bit, they're gonna fight back a little bit onto this. But looking at the finals against G2, leaning on to a blind pick Corki, we don't know if it's a team decision or his decision. That is a bit weird. Orianna was out, Lucian was out, and all of a sudden you have a player going on to Corki. In the past he played Twisted Fate, in the past he played Azir. I think there are things that he could play. But still, the fact that Nemesis has very little synergy with his jungler is worrisome. You know, Chovy has a similar issue, right? Pyosik and Chovy 2v2 is not the strongest and most precise, but Chovy, as a player, when he's focused on his mechanics and his laning, is an absolute monster. So what is Nemesis focused on? That is the question, right? That is the question for me. I think the most impressive form of Nemesis that I saw was the one when Garen Yuumi was being played and they were playing Twisted Fate and they were also playing Corki. Very different time for Corki, right? And he was managing the silence very well and dodging ganks super well because they knew in time that they would be stronger. Garen Yuumi would reach a point where they would be stronger, and this is the Nemesis that I enjoyed the most. The current Nemesis I am not so excited by because, you know, it was supposed to be the self-made Nemesis reunion where they play so well together, but it doesn't seem to be the case, and I don't know how much they can solve in a short amount of time, but this worries me. This worries me. So all in all, thank you so much for watching. Please leave feedback on what you think about this video. Subscribe if you want more content. If you sneeze during this video, bless you and bless your face. I did this in one take, just go. That's why we don't have any, you know, cool graphics coming up on the screen, because I am going out to eat some Korean food and catch some porygons because it's community day. I wish you all the best. Take care.